Okay guys, welcome back. So I'm going to show you how to make this easy pizza dough recipe that I found. It's really yummy and it's pretty simple. It doesn't really take a whole lot of ingredients. So I'm going to show you real quick what goes into it, and then I will walk you through how we make it. So first of all, we are going to need some flour. We will need instant yeast. I did take it out so it can start getting room temperature, but you can either use a packet, or if you have like a jar of it like I do, you can use 2 1/4 teaspoon. And then we're going to use some sugar, just a little bit, some salt here, and then garlic powder. And then the other thing that you need is extra virgin olive oil, or just olive oil, and some warm water. So pretty simple, just a handful of ingredients. Usually you have most of them at home. I think the most uncommon one would be like yeast. If you don't usually make bread, then you may or may not have that at home. But anyway, let's get to putting this together. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to measure out our flour here. And we're just gonna throw it in a bowl here. The one thing I will say, when you're making bread or dough of any kind, when you are measuring out your flour, you don't want to like just scoop the flour out like this, because it can compact it and you might end up with more flour than what you actually need. And that can make your dough not rise or turn out as good. So instead, usually just use a spoon and fill your measuring cup up so that you've got the flour that you need, but it's not like packed into your measuring cup. So there, we've got a cup, and we are just going to get another cup here. Definitely going to need to get some more flour because I'm getting low on it. So for this recipe, I'm just going to make one pizza. So what I found is that the recipe does make just like one pizza crust. That's it. So we're using 2 1/3 cups. So I'm going to kind of dip a little bit of that in there. So I did not fill up that cup, but since I'm getting so low on flour, it does make it a little bit easier to just dip that in there. Okay, there is our 2 1/3 cup of flour. So next, what we're going to do is grab our yeast, and since I'm using a jar of yeast and not an actual packet, we are going to measure that out. So let me find my measuring spoons here. We're going to do 2 1/4 tablespoon. So we'll just drop this in there. And the nice thing about the dough was that you don't have to like do your yeast separate. You can pre-rise your yeast, but I put it straight into the recipe last time and it worked just fine. So I would say, if you're able to do that, just take the easy way. Throw it all in there. Okay, so then we're gonna do sugar next, and sugar is 1 1/2 teaspoons. So we're just gonna throw that in there. Find my 1/2 teaspoon here. Throw that together. Okay, and then last is salt and garlic powder. So salt I've got here, and let's just see how much we need. So we need 1 1/2 teaspoons of salt. So we're gonna grab that. So there's 1/2 teaspoon and 1 teaspoon. And then for garlic, we're gonna use 1/4 of a teaspoon of garlic powder here. Just throw that in there. Okay, so that's all of our dry ingredients. Snap that on there. Okay, so let's go ahead and we're gonna mix all of our dry ingredients together really good. Sorry, I don't have a ton of counter space, so just kind of have to make do with what we have. Okay, so we've got that mixed in there really good. Now we're going to add, so I did preheat the water, so it calls for warm water. You usually want warm water because that's what's going to activate your yeast. So again, you could technically like prep your yeast if you want, but I didn't need to do that last time, so I'm not going to do that this time. But I did preheat 3/4 cup of water here. I do use a thermometer just to double check and make sure that it's not too hot, because if the water or the liquid is too hot, it will kill your yeast and it won't rise. So we're going to throw that in there. I should have taken the metal spoon out ahead of time, but I did not. Failed at that. Okay, we're going to throw that in my dishwater, and then we need 2 tablespoons here, I believe. Let me just double check. 2 tablespoons of oil. So we're gonna do 2 tablespoons of oil. Throw that in there. Okay. And throw this in here. And now what we're going to do is we are going to grab a wooden spoon and we're going to mix it. And the wooden spoon is helpful because when you're making dough, if you use plastic or metal, it sometimes sticks more. So the wooden spoon tends to be more helpful. Okay, so we're gonna mix this up really good. You also don't have to add all of the flour. You could withhold a cup of flour if you wanted and add it in after you've kind of got it really well mixed. But last time that I did this, it did take all of that flour and then some, so I didn't feel like it was going to be much of an issue here. So we're just gonna mix this. Essentially, I just kind of like keep folding the dough in on itself. And then we can always work the dough a little bit more with your hands just to make sure that it's nice and mixed. So it is still going to be somewhat sticky, but it should be able, like, you should be able to work it without it like completely pulling apart. I would say this dough, I'm probably going to add just a little bit more flour to, because it is still somewhat sticky, a little stickier than what I would want it to be. So you see how like when I pull my hand back, it's kind of coming off of my hands. Like ideally it wouldn't do that. So we're gonna just add a little bit more flour to it and work it in. Okay. I am definitely a messy cook. I'm not a clean one. I tend to get flour everywhere, so I usually have to clean that up afterwards. But whatever it takes. Okay. That's looking pretty good. And essentially we don't want it to be too sticky because then when we go to roll it out into a pizza, like actual crust shape, it'll stick to the rolling pan. Okay, I think that's pretty good. So we're just gonna like turn that into a nice little ball there. And then we're gonna set that aside. And now what we're gonna do is grab a clean bowl. So I've got a clean bowl here. And let me just wash my hands real quick. Okay, so we've got a clean bowl here and we're just gonna drizzle some olive oil in it. Essentially we want just enough to completely cover the bottom and the sides so that the dough does not stick to it. I do not have like a little pastry brush, so I just roll the oil around and then I use my clean hands to kind of rub it up the sides so that as the dough rises, it doesn't stick to the sides. So we're just gonna kind of like roll the oil in there and then kind of make sure that it goes around. Okay, I think that's pretty good. It's nice and covered. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and take our pizza dough ball here, and you want to roll it alongside the inside so that it's got oil on all sides of the dough. Again, that just helps it not stick as it's rising. Also gives it a delicious flavor. But okay, so that's our pizza dough. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna cover it with some saran wrap. I did not have saran wrap the first time I made this, so I actually just used a towel and I set it outside because it was really warm, and that worked perfect. And then we're just gonna let it rise for 30 minutes or until it's about double the size. Okay, so what we're gonna do is sprinkle a little bit of flour onto your surface before you roll out the dough. It's almost done rising, but we're just gonna prep the surface so that you can go ahead and roll it out. And you can see that the dough has risen and golden size. Go ahead and take off the plastic wrap. Get our rolling pin out. And then we're gonna press down our dough so that it's more deflated. And then we'll just go ahead and kind of work the dough a little bit. And we will keep working it until we feel like it's good and mixed. Just kind of work it into a good ball. And then what we'll do is
once it's worked into a good sized ball, we'll smush it down and start to roll it out with the rolling pin. And the goal is we want to roll out the crust so that it's about 12 inches. So we have about a 12-inch radius for the pizza crust here. So we're just going to kind of keep smoothing it out, moving it around so that we get an even crust. And then once we get the crust rolled out, then we're going to fold over the edges here, and that is going to kind of create that edge on the pizza like you would see on a pizza from like a pizza shop. So we've got this pretty ready to go. So now we're going to put it onto the pan, and I'm just going to adjust the dough, clean up the crust a little bit, and then what we're going to do is put some oil on there. So we're going to put a little bit of olive oil on the crust, and the pan that I'm putting this onto already had olive oil on the foil, and that's just to help keep the crust from sticking to it and from burning. So I just keep in mind you're going to want to make sure that the pan that you are cooking it on does have some sort of oil there. And then here we're going to go ahead and put some holes in the crust, essentially just poking it with a fork. That way the crust doesn't bubble up. And then you're going to put your favorite toppings on. So I am going to do just a regular pepperoni pizza. So I've got some pizza sauce from Aldi's that I grabbed. I'm going to use that up. And then we're just going to go ahead and put some pepperonis on. And then we will top it all off with some mozzarella cheese. And while I am putting this together, I did already start preheating the oven. So you'll want to make sure that you preheat your oven to 350, and then that way, by the time you get done rolling out your dough and topping your pizza, your oven is warm and ready to go. So we're just going to finish up with the pepperonis here, and then throw on some mozzarella cheese. And then once we get the cheese on there, we will put the pizza in the oven. And usually I'm able to get it browned or get the crust to where I like it within like 12 to 13 minutes. That's usually what I stick with. But depending on your oven, you might have to like cook it for as long as 15 minutes. But yeah, so we're going to go ahead and put the pizza in the oven. It is already preheated, and then we're just going to set our timer.